All right, we're going to get started. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I think this is a really important topic as we start to move toward more video conferencing. We do a lot in the online programs with student portfolios, and we see a lot of these issues come up where you can't see people, or it's just we want to make sure that we're presenting a very professional image when we are web conferencing affiliates or partners or even with students. So this is an OLID-sponsored event. OLID is Online Learning and Instructional Design. We're a combination of online learning and the old educational technology. So we've come together to provide better services across the university. And Ron Herbig, who's an instructional designer and also an instructor in both nutrition and health professions education, will be running this entire presentation from the room across the hall. Yeah, so, and then Isabella, who's also an instructional designer and an instructor in health professions education, will be monitoring because I have to leave the meeting as soon as I'm done here. So the objectives for this web conferencing is we hope that by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to identify some of the key elements of professionalism for web conferencing. We also hope that you'll be able to pick the best choices for lighting, for visual aids, for background when you're doing web conferencing. You'll have a clear understanding of what your participants will need from you when you're presenting to them, and basically just how to apply good presenter skills. And then finally, Ron will come over from across the hall and he will finish up with a question and answer with you. So I'm going to toggle you over to Ron.
As you can see, there's 3 screens up there. Obviously, you can see yourself in one of them, and you see Ron, which is me. And on the right side, you can see that there's Ron with backlighting. So you can see that many times people set themselves up with a window behind them when they're trying to do a web conference or any meeting or anything like that. And this is what you end up looking like. You end up looking like you're in the witness protection program, and that's not a good thing. Even if you move it a little bit, the camera will adjust on the laptop. I'm using a laptop over here, but you can use a webcam. The camera will do some adjusting. The problem is it doesn't do great adjusting. So you can see the backlighting is not a good choice. And you can turn on a light. As you can see, I've got this just a flexible light. I can turn that on and put some lighting on just to illuminate my face a little bit. But side lighting doesn't really do much either. As you can see, there's still a lot of shadowing, giving a lot of reflections. So one of the things you want to do is make sure you have a good front lighting. I'm just going to swing this thing around, put it up here in front of me, make sure it's out of the camera. And the whole idea of doing this kind of stuff is that you don't have to have a studio. You can do it anywhere. As you can see in the middle picture, there's a lot of junk laying around here. I'm over here in the conference room. There's the water bottle there, the table with stuff on it, the printer right next to me, and I'm on this little cart. And I'm just using this for ease of moving around because I'm going to move this thing and give you a better view. So you can see that the front lighting is not exactly perfect. So you want to eliminate the backlighting. That's the big thing. So let's get rid of that screen. So now you have a little bit better image. You can see that the screen cleared up a little bit. If you don't have enough illumination, you get a grainy image, and you don't want that. So I'm also going to turn on the overheads, and let's see what that does for us. So now you should have a lot crisper image. The problem is we now still have a little bit of a background, and want to make sure we have the right distance for the camera. Many times when you see a webinar, all you see is a talking head. So somebody's up here about like this size, and they're looking down here at the screen, not up at the camera like this. So you want to make sure that those are things you want to eliminate. So let's move the camera back. Now if we move the camera back, we can see we get a little bit more of a realistic shot. And now if I'm looking at the camera or if I'm looking at the screen, it's a little bit more difficult to tell. You don't really want to use a headshot because it really doesn't do much. It doesn't allow for any kind of inflection of hand movements or demonstrating anything. So you want to make sure that you get far enough back so you have a good view. There's still a problem though, the background. Along with the background, there's a little bit of, we can try and eliminate the background, so we can just move around like this. But as you can see, there's no parallel lines here. All the lines seem to converge on something. Everything's a little bit crooked. And that's not a normal view. Now you can see by the center picture, I just swung this whole cart around. And now I'm going to have some very sophisticated supports I'm going to prop up the camera because I want to bring it up to a certain height. So I'm going to take a couple of these Kleenex boxes. There we go. What I'm trying to accomplish here is reaching eye level with the camera. So now I can tilt this more forward and we can eliminate some of those converging lines. There we go. Now the other thing you want to do is make sure you have headroom. You never want to cut off the head when you're putting on a presentation because that's just not natural. You want to have a little bit of headroom. So even if you tilt it back a little bit, but we can still clear up this background. Let me just swing this around a little bit like this and back a little bit more towards, there we go. Now this is more of a natural look. You can see that there's plenty of headroom. Let me bring this down just a pinch. And I have a clear background. Makes it easier for everybody to pay attention to me instead of looking at anything distracting in the background. The other thing I want to talk about is the microphone itself. Excuse me. Because there are many different types of microphones that you can use. And if you use the desktop mic, if you're this far back, you can see that there may be less volume. And if you get less volume, then people are going to have to crank it up. You may also pick up a lot of background noise. Now in this room, I can hear a lot of background noise with the vents above me, which is not a good thing. But you can't necessarily control all that. One thing you can control is the type of microphone that you do use. A USB mic would be a good choice rather than a fixed mic, so that way you can have it closer to you. If you have a desk mic, it could be like right here and close to you, out of the camera range, and then you get good solid audio. But you want a directional mic. You want one of those pencil mics that has just one little port where you talk into. If you have a big round mic that's an omnidirectional that picks up from all the way around, now you're going to pick up more background noise also. So you want to make sure you have something that's going to fit the purpose that you're creating here. A lavalier mic can also be used, something that you pin on your chest like they do up in the Centennial room. Those are good, good mics to have if you're going to be a far distance from the camera. But one of the things that I like to use is a headphone mic. The reason being is that when you're in a web conference, you have the microphone and you have speakers. Over there where you're at right now, there are a couple of speakers that are broadcasting into the room. There's also a microphone on the webcam. And that may be picking up audio. But because it's turned off, you're not picking up any audio. And you're not getting that feedback. If your audio is coming through the speakers and then going through the microphone, then going through the speakers and going through the microphone, that's when you get that harmonic squeal, that feedback. By using headset like this with the boom mic, it eliminates that problem. The other thing you could use is a desk mic with these earbuds. Earbuds come with any kind of MP3 players, phones, just a little thing to plug in your ear, or regular headphones, something that will eliminate the audio from broadcasting into the microphone and giving you that feedback. So that's something that you really want to consider. Those are the real technical issues. And now that we have those things out of the way, let's go into some other ideas here. First, you can't do this alone. Marilyn was introducing, Isabella is over there to assist if there are any technical problems. I had Quentin over here turn on a camera. Typically, if you're doing a web conference, you would want to have a chat window. If you have a chat window, you need somebody to monitor that. As a presenter, it's going to be difficult to monitor that, monitor all the technical issues, and monitor a chat room. So you want to have other people helping you with this. So you need a producer, somebody to monitor things to facilitate the whole the whole conference. So the producer would take care of technical issues, resolve them before and during the conference. And like I said, somebody to monitor the chat so they can repeat whatever questions are coming through the chat to the facilitator, and then they can be addressed. And typically when you have all these people working with you, you want to introduce them and let them know, and let the audience know what their role is. So for instance, if Isabel was monitoring the chat, you just say Isabel is monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, send them to Isabella through the chat room and she'll pass them on to blah, blah, blah. One of the other things to do is use a clock. You always want to keep on time with a web conference or anything else that you're presenting. This was scheduled for 50 minutes. I'm sure we're not going to go that far, which means you'll have plenty of time to go out to get something to eat after we do our question and answer. Typically when people are doing presentations, they have a remote control that they use to advance slides. And if you use that and you're comfortable with that, you can use it here too. So if I were showing a PowerPoint presentation, I could use the remote to advance slides and feel like I was in front of an audience. Many people are using wireless right now. And wireless is fine if you have a good wireless modem. Here we have good wireless connections. If you're at home and you're participating in a presentation, you may not have that same speed. So things may be a little jerky when they're changing screens or when they're doing different things. So you want to make sure you're on a wired internet connection. It always works out best. You have less interference. What happens with wireless is if you have a lot of people on at the same time in that same zone, in that same station, what you're going to end up with is a little bit of an overload and a slowdown. In this particular case, we didn't do this because we want to go through and give you these as a learning experience. But you would always tell your audience to turn off phones, turn off any alarms they may have. Their iPad may have an alarm, anything like that. Plus, turn off their microphone. If they're not going to be speaking, they don't need to have their microphone on. In some situations, like in Google Hangouts, it will display who is presenting or who is speaking. So that means if you're at home in your jammies and all of a sudden you cough, poof, you're going to be on the screen. Now, that's not going to be very, very professional. So you want to make sure that you turn off your microphone unless you're going to speak. In some softwares, it allows the presenter or the facilitator to turn off everybody's microphone at once. And that's a nice feature to have. The problem is then you have to raise your hand for them to turn on the microphone so that you can speak. So it takes a little bit more facilitation, a little bit more coordination to be able to do that with things like WebEx or some of the other web conferencing tools. We're using AnyMeeting here, which is something that has a reasonable license fee, and we're able to record with this. That's one of the reasons we like to use it. Google Hangouts, anybody can use Google Hangouts through their Google apps, and you can have a few people in there. I think the maximum number is 10, but with 10 people in there, it's going to be pretty cumbersome. So if you need to have 2 or 3 people in there, it would be a perfect way of perfect. So that's another thing. When you're going to have a silence, a pause of any type, let the audience know. Many times what happens if there's more than a 1 second or 2 second pause, then the audience thinks they lost a connection. So make sure that you let them know. As I said, my throat was getting dry. I was going to have a drink. And I had a little bit of a silencer. So it's important to make sure that the audience always knows that something's going on and they're still connected. When you do a PowerPoint for this type of application, normally PowerPoints have a lot of slides. They have a lot of video, a lot of visuals. You want to make sure that when you're doing something like this, you have a lot more of them. Sometimes they say twice as many visuals as you would normally have because you want to keep the audience's attention. Things are going to be changing a lot. So if they're changing a lot, then people will keep in tune to the screen itself. So keep that in mind. I don't know if you can notice, but I'm sitting far enough back where I'm talking to the camera or I'm talking to the screen, and you may not be able to tell the difference. Always talk to the audience itself, not to the machine. It's very important to connect with the audience. If you're in a presentation live, you're going to have eye contact. You can't have that here except with the camera. So you can do your best to have eye contact with the audience through the camera itself by looking directly at it. In some situations, you may want to have questions at a certain particular time. You may want to stop in the middle or at the end to answer questions because it's easier to facilitate when you're doing just one thing like that instead of having interruptions. It's up to you on what your topics are and how you want to present those things. So plan in some time for questions, question answer, and then when you get to the end of what you're doing, excuse me a second. Make sure you summarize what you've gone through so that it recaps everything that you've presented. It gives the audience something to say, okay, yeah, I remember that, I remember this. Do that so that the audience knows what they've gone through and what they were intended to learn. So at this point, let me get to my final portion of it here. I hope this has brought to you some things to mind that will help you be better at doing web conferencing. So we identified some different elements for success, all the technical issues that we talked about, the lighting, make sure you have good lighting, make sure you have good camera position, make sure you have no background lighting that's going to cause problems and a clear background for no distractions. The other things that you need to do is have a group to facilitate this. Make sure you have a producer or a moderator of some type, at least a couple of people to help with all this kind of thing because it takes time. Being the presenter, there's a lot of stress on that, putting everything together, but now trying to do that and take care of technical issues, timing issues, chats, really doesn't work out too well. You can't do any one of them very well. Make sure the audience understands their portion of the presentation, whether they're supposed to ask questions during the presentation, after the presentation, turning off their phones, turning off any alarms, all that type of thing. So make sure that they know what their part is. And then some of the other techniques that I mentioned, PowerPoints themselves, using the remote control, and any of those types of considerations that you want to bring to the attention of your audience. So at this point, that sort of concludes what I have to present. I think you've seen some illustrations of what I'm talking about as far as the lighting. So if I get up good close and personal, you can see right now that I'm looking at the screen instead of the camera. Now I'm looking at the camera. It makes quite a difference. So, and from the other camera angle in the center, you can see what my setup looks like. Let me give you a better example. I'm across the hall in the conference room. You can see my desk light has a piece of paper taped over it just to diffuse the light a little bit so I don't get those harsh shadows on my beautiful porcelain skin. The desk I'm using is just a cart with my, my Kleenex boxes propping everything up. That's basically it. You don't need a studio to do all this kind of stuff. You can pull off a pretty good presentation by having the right background, the right lighting, and the right camera angle. Okay? So I'll be right across the hall. I'll be right there.